This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager.
The narratives were pretty much set for day 4 at the Oval. Australia were keeping the metaphoric urn, but England was seen as the slightly better team in the series and definitely ahead on the moral ashes. As for who was the better team overall, maybe it was still with Australia, but after days 2 and 3 from Old Trafford, and also day 3 here at the Oval, it was getting harder to actually make that call. David Warner was done. Usman Khawaja had been worked out. Mark Wood was the saviour, and England had so many more ideas in the field than Australia did. Today has just been one bad day for the narratives. David Warner batted really well. He basically looked as solid as we've seen him all this summer. And his innings against India in the World Test Championship final and also at Lords were pretty much the only other option. In fact, you could argue that this was as solid as he's looked overseas since his 66 at Rawalpindi, which was also on a very flat wicket. His last 100 away from home was in 2017 in Bangladesh. This one was probably a little bit more like the Rawalpindi one, as the wicket had clearly flattened out. Either way, Warner looked solid, and we really haven't seen much of that. Outside of an inside edge he wasn't sure about, a flappy hook shot, and then a slog sweep from root, he was set. So if you thought he was completely done, he certainly looked a lot better than that. Of course, age robs you of your consistency, not your peak. There was also Usman Khawaja, who I've always thought of as a binge batter. You look at his first-class record overall, and it's just been quite up and down. A poor first year, which is fine, followed by 2 really strong ones that suddenly catapult him to become an international player. Then he has 3 subpar years, followed by a good surge, and then another dip until he runs into this latest period. Watching him over the years has made me look for signs when he's about to get really good or really bad. Like in the 2015-2016 Big Bash season, where in 4 matches, he made 345 runs at a strike rate of over 160. He just gets on a roll, and almost as quickly he seems to turn it all off. I thought in this series, England had worked him out fairly well. Even his runs here in the first innings were extremely torturous. Even by his own defensive nature, he almost gave up trying to score runs, and progressively through the series, I think England have bowled a lot better to him. It has now become funny to point out that Crawley and Khawaja are the 2 leading run scorers in this series, and yet Crawley is doubling Khawaja's strike rate. And despite the fact that they have about as many runs as each other, the Aussie has faced 117 more overs. This wicket did seem to assist him a little bit more, just like it did for Warner. And suddenly he was scoring at a decent rate, looking almost impregnable at the same time. We've seen one or the other in this series. We haven't usually seen both. And while those 2 were batting with ease, there was Mark Wood. On Sky, Mark Butcher suggested England might be waiting for the ball to reverse to bring him on. Except that when the ball started to reverse, he still didn't actually come on. And that didn't explain why he hadn't bowled a short spell early on anyway. We had to wait 30 overs in to see the fast northerner, and then he was slow. Like, not slow for a normal bowler, but for him. If he crossed 88 miles per hour at any point, I think I must have been blinking. He still hit Khawaja on the head, but the man who changed England's fortunes in his ashes suddenly looked either tired or injured. 3 tests in a row may not be a lot for a normal seamer, but for Wood, it's like running across 200 metres of hot coals while people hurl swordfish at you. If Wood was the difference between the teams earlier, either the schedule, his body, or the pitch seemed to completely nullify him. But the most disappointing thing was that England looked flat even before they threw him the ball. They had become the best team in the world at just chipping away with wickets. I call it the new parent method. They seem to have a checklist of plans with them at all times. Start with the wobble ball, get the ball replaced, check if the ball is swinging, bounces, reverse swing, get the ball replaced again, bowling dry, spin, part-timers, and then repeat. Usually, somewhere along the way, they find a method to chip a couple of wickets. Today, they used Joe Root and the footmarks for a long time. Now, it was against 2 left-handers who he bowls well against, and it was a fine idea, and usually Root would keep the score quiet if nothing else. But he didn't manage to actually keep the runs particularly low, and he didn't take a wicket, and yet they persisted with him for a very long time. Obviously, he bowled more because Moeen's groin is, well, broken, and having Wood and Moeen less than right was an issue. But England also took forever to try bounces as well. At this point in the series, they have just looked way smarter than Australia by a considerable amount. And today, they didn't. And Australia didn't lose a wicket or completely punish them. But I did wonder, how many runs would the England batters have taken from this lackluster attack today? And while you never want to get too excited in a chase of this size, Australia is in a very good position from here. Maybe the rain means that they have to bat a little bit faster on the next day, which actually helps England. But maybe it rains again and all they have to do is last a session and a half. But before today, the thought was that Australia was lucky to be in their position. The first test was a coin toss, the third one as well. They were going to lose the fourth one had it not been for rain. But what is the narrative if they win with the 8th biggest chase in test history, or draw from this position of strength as England looks completely flustered in the field? I mean, where does that leave the storyline of the real Ashes or the moral Ashes that England already had one hand on? We have learned from this series that neither team really wants to make it through more than a few days, and sometimes even a few sessions, without completely tearing up the script and just starting from scratch. A David Warner 100 in a massive chase that is done as slowly as Mark Wood is bowling is not how I thought this series would end. This is more of a crashes than an Ashes.